It's 30 minutes from a tournament, and you need to know every weakness for every bespoke kill team. I'm Nick from Venture Minis, and get ready in 3, 2, 1. Pathfinders only need visibility from their operatives to deploy Markelites on your operatives. These Markelites build in power until the target operative can no longer be obscured. However, with less models than other Horde teams, Pathfinders struggle to win on objectives and are better at killing than scoring. Using line-of-sight blocking terrain effectively to avoid their marksman and weapons expert is critical to ensuring you don't get shot off the board. If you start getting Markelite tokens on an operative, consider hiding that operative before your opponent can gain benefits. Or take advantage of knowing your operative will be shot at and push threats on other parts of the board. Vet Guard are incredibly aggressive and rely on scoring reliable points early through board saturation. There are two common approaches to destroying Vet Guard. One option is to hit them with a blast weapon in the first turning point that destroys enough models to gain that early lead, but this is only possible if your opponent positions poorly. The better option is to allow them to gain those 4 points in the first turning point, but crush them in the late game by denying their security tac ops like Secure Ground or Hatchway. Make sure you know the threat range of the demo mine, which can kill something potentially 14 inches away from your opponent's drop zone. Since the Wyrmblade are allowed to change their order in the first turning point, beware of their aggression. Beware the big threats on the 32mm bases especially, like the Sanctus Sniper or the Talon. These threats all have 3 APL and will provide you much more danger than the rest of their operatives. Like with Vet Guard, blasting them in the first turning point is a safe bet if they deployed poorly, otherwise play the long game. This is especially strong against Wyrmblade, who have Seek and Destroy and Infiltration, whereas Vet Guard can rely on security. Seek and Destroy and Infiltration forces the Wyrmblade to take parts of the board they may not want to be in, so you can use this to trade out and score. The Blooded are often viewed as a melee team, but don't be mistaken. This team controls the board much like other Horde teams with expendable GA2 troopers. Beware the Diabolical Bombs Splash. Blooded only have Seek and Destroy, so they're forced to take space to score secondaries much like Wyrmblade. Like all previous Horde teams, blast weapons are particularly effective here. Breachers, on the other hand, unlike other Horde teams, they're slow and have no way to speed up their movement. Take advantage of this by securing your positions on the board early, but don't overextend into their threat range. They telegraph their moves clearly, so pay attention to where their attack order is placed. They only have a 12-inch threat range to start, so be careful of that. Phobos also rely on you not knowing their abilities, so make sure to read their datasheets. Things like Multi-Spectrum Array can make them ignore obscuring and their own smoke grenades. The Omni Scrambler allows them to pause one of your operatives and make them activate later in the turn, whereas Terror makes them hold objectives easier by lowering your APL on objectives. Intercessors need to trade 1 Intercessor for 2 operatives to make their prowess worth it more often than not. Position to avoid the charge, fight, shoot from assault intercessors, and pay attention to the blasting Auspex Grenadier who can ignore obscuring. They are incredibly fast and durable, but AP will tear them to shreds. If you're a Horde team, out-activate them and position your AP2 shooters to respond. Legionary has lots of blast threats, but no great objective holders. The Anointed will run onto objectives and cause havoc if allowed, but can't do mission actions when in the crazy mode. Deleting their melee threats and forcing them to walk onto objectives with the remaining models severely weakens them. They don't want to have the Plasma Operative be the one sitting on objectives. Novitiates rely on their faith points to commit extremely reliable plays. Blinding Faith is the biggest one, which allows them to get the benefits of cover and ignore advantage when they're being shot at, but they can also make their dice very reliable as well with these faith points. Bait these points out by shooting safely at operatives as often as you can, so by the third turning point, they're on the back foot. They're extremely short range unless they spend a CP to boost their shooting distance, so they won't be able to shoot back unless they telegraph it. Most of their power is within their flamers and faith point generators like the Pronatus, and once they're gone, you're able to win. The Exaction Squad are reliable shooters at close range, but they have no AP and 7 runes, so the Exaction Squad takes the worst of the Breachers and puts them in the team. They're able to lock down Horde operatives with abilities like Arrest, but need to play aggressively to succeed. They don't have any great AP shooters and don't have the best melee power, so if your team is particularly good at one or the other, you can press that advantage. Fellgor Ravagers. Play open board, maybe? They're kind of busted. Wait for a nerf. Good luck. Maybe try to bait out their frenzy early, if you can. But, you can't do that on Into the Dark. I don't know. Anyways, the Hearthkyn Salvagers power budget sits in the power of their 3 gunners. If you're able to kneecap these gunners or avoid them, this team's power is diminished tremendously. Additionally, AP teams will tear them to shreds, so if you use an AP2 weapon, they will fall apart. Their lack of silent weapons means their moves will also be very telegraphed. As for the Hunter Clade, although they look scary and are on big bases, the Hunter Clade's melee Sicarian troops are frail and die quickly. They don't have any great AoE options or grenades, so they struggle into many matchups, particularly ones that are able to put a silent sniper on vantage. And if you shred their Sicarians, they have a hard time staying on top of objectives. The Starstriders have no good AP weapons outside of their lone melee operative. Against any non-elite team, you will always have to be cautious of their artillery strikes and position safely as to not be blasted. They can fire them from vantage and gain the benefit from vantage, so be aware of that in the first turning point. This team is the jack of all trades and benefits from having operatives that are good at specific niches. Read up on each of their operatives and know their threats. For example, the Electromeister is capable of doing a free mission action and can cause mortal wounds if you get too close, and so is great at sitting on objectives, whereas the Death Cult Executioner is a melee machine and can strike before you can, even if you charge them. Knowledge is power against Starstriders even more than against other teams. The Kasrkin are all about killing you. Take as much space as safely as possible in the first turning point to force the Kasrkin to come to you. They have no good melee options and are prone to fall apart when pushed to take objectives. As long as they don't get early kills, they will lose. The Corsairs have a mean turn 1 bomb with the Flying Shade Runner, who can blow up horde teams. However, if they don't get this early momentum, they collapse. Make sure to position safely for this. If you're an elite team, aggression shuts down the Corsairs' advantage, especially on loot, or they can often gain an early lead. Void Dancers want to start with a strong turn 1 and will often attempt to start with Melodrama on the Sadeth by getting an early kill with their Death Jester on vantage point. They all have fly, so this can be guaranteed if you're out in the open. Make sure to position conservatively to avoid giving the Void Dancers an early advantage. They only have 8 wounds, so once you start dealing damage, they collapse. If you can charge them to finish them off, do so. The Farstalker Kinband is paper thin if you break them out of cover. They only have 8 wounds with a 5-up save, but they get double cover if they're in cover, so make sure that you break them out of cover if you have that option. Make sure to kill the Skinner. Don't let it shoot at you at all. It has a 12-inch threat range. Despite looking like it's heavy, it will just annihilate anything it shoots. Make sure to prioritize that in trade more than you think you need to get rid of it. They also have 2 silent shooters, but the long shot ignores obscuring, so they will fortify a vantage point and put him on it if they can. Watch out for poach on loot, otherwise you should be good. The Hierotek Circle requires you to outmaneuver them in score. In an infinite turns game, they will just win, but with only 4 turning points you can win before that time comes by scoring. They rely on a game of attrition from reanimation to win, and their APL is overall very low, so they struggle to hold objectives and take mission actions. But they have a surprising burst movement which they can do. They can have a 9-inch Alpha Strike move in the first turning point with the Chronometron, so beware that. The Hierotek wins with the counterattack, not necessarily with aggression. The Plasmacytes are Swiss cheese, and they probably won't resurrect them because they can only resurrect 2 things per turning point. So killing more than 2 Hierotek per turn is really good. They're overall not great in melee, but they have lots of blast and splash and are great at shooting, so watch out for the command ability, which can group activate their shooting. The Kommandos do not play like traditional orcs. They will be incredibly sneaky and charge out of conceal like they're cosplaying as gene stealers. With their poor saves, outshooting orcs is always a safe bet. If you keep an eye on their charge threat range, you can control a large portion of the board as their long-range shooting is limited, but beware the splash on the rocket launcher. You lose to Gellarpox if you play them without a clear strategy. You can't split your priorities against them, and there's 2 strategies that beat Gellarpox. You have to know your team strategy to choose between the 2. First is to delete 2 hulks before the end of the second turning point, which dramatically lowers Gellarpox's ability to control the board. With only 2 operatives able to stand on objectives for more than 5 seconds, they won't be able to score enough objectives to win. The second option is to go after the little guys and remove their board presence while ignoring most of the hulks. This allows you to outposition the hulks by removing the chaff. The hulks can't do actions well, so on a mission that requires actions, the second strategy can be really effective and great for horde teams. As for Warp Coven, sorcerers are everything for this team. Any model traded for a sorcerer is a positive trade for you, so you have to eliminate them first. It has a very weak Overwatch for a semi-elite team, and they're very CP hungry. Make sure to eliminate those sorcerers. Hand of the Archon. Like Corsairs and Void Dancers, Hand of the Archon requires a lot of early momentum, particularly with kills. They gain pain tokens every time they incapacitate an operative, and have a huge turn 1 alpha strike with a grenade just like the Corsairs have. However, unlike Corsairs, they have the Denizens of the Night stratagem, which prevents them from being broken out of conceal if they're near their deployment zone. However, things like the Vetguard Spotter ability, as well as abilities that ignore obscuring, like the Auspex, can help deal damage against them during the first turning point. In general, the Hand of the Archon team is hyper-aggressive and relies on getting those kills early. Limiting the amount of momentum they can grab by trading up against their 9 operatives with only 8 wounds can help tremendously. And that's it! That's every Bespoke kill team before Ashes of Faith. You should now be ready to face these teams at your next game day or tournament. Of course, this was just a quick and dirty rundown. Each of these teams has lots of nuance that is worth exploring. My biggest advice is to read the stat profiles of each of the teams you're expecting to face, then play against them. Nothing beats hand-on experience. This was Nick from Venture Minis. Thanks for watching. I have a coffee link in the description if you'd like to support this hobby of mine, and you can put your tips below for your fellow gamers and check out my other guides. Have a good day.